The Galactic Confederation's flagship Eternal Glory dropped out of hyperspace with all the subtlety of a cosmic fireworks display. Admiral Zeph, a 7-foot-tall reptilian with scales that shimmered like oil on water, stood on the bridge admiring their dramatic entrance. His species had perfected the art of intimidating arrivals over the past 3 centuries of galactic conquest. "Behold the primitive world of Earth," Zeph announced to his crew, his voice carrying the kind of authority that came from never being wrong. Well, almost never. Their crude radio signals suggest they've barely discovered fire. This should be our easiest acquisition yet. The bridge crew nodded in agreement. After all, Earth's inhabitants had only recently figured out how to leave their own atmosphere. What could possibly go wrong? Down on Earth, Captain Jake Martinez was having what he generously called a Tuesday. He'd been sipping coffee in the International Space Defense Command Center when the massive alien ship appeared on every screen, radar, and smartphone camera across the planet. His response was about as enthusiastic as someone being asked to work overtime. "Well, that's new," Jake said, not bothering to put down his coffee mug. "Somebody want to hail them, or should we just wait to see if they're selling something?" The communication came through in perfect English, which should have been the first red flag for Admiral Zeph, but hindsight is 20/20. "Greetings, primitive beings of Earth. I am Admiral Zeph of the Galactic Confederation. We have come to offer you the honor of joining our glorious empire. Prepare to be amazed by our superior technology." Jake glanced around the command center, where his staff was responding to humanity's first contact with aliens with the same energy level as a DMV on Monday morning. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim was already running diagnostic checks on their systems, while Communications Officer Tom Bradley was Googling whether there were any protocols for this sort of thing. "Right," Jake said into the comm. "Welcome to Earth, Admiral. I'm Captain Martinez. Nice ship you've got there. Very shiny. Would you like to come down for coffee, or should we come up? We've got a shuttle around here somewhere." There was a long pause from the alien ship. This wasn't going according to the script. Usually primitive species either cowered in terror or fell to their knees in worship. They definitely didn't offer beverages. You are not afraid?" Admiral Zeph asked, his confidence wavering slightly. "Should we be?" Jake replied. "I mean, you seem friendly enough. Haven't shot at us yet, which is more than I can say for some of our neighbors." Admiral Zeph decided to escalate. Time for the intimidation display. "Behold our mighty weapons." The Eternal Glory powered up its plasma cannons, creating an impressive light show that would have terrified any reasonable species. Jake watched the display while finishing his coffee. "Pretty lights. Our 4th of July fireworks are a bit flashier, but that's not bad for space. You guys want to dock, or should we meet in the middle? I've got a lunch meeting in an hour, so if we could wrap this up." And that's when Admiral Zeph realized that conquering Earth might not be as straightforward as the last 400 planets. Admiral Zeph decided to try a different approach. Clearly these humans didn't understand the gravity of their situation. "Time for a proper demonstration of Galactic Confederation superiority. Perhaps you do not comprehend our technological advancement," Zeph said, his voice taking on the tone of a teacher explaining basic concepts to slow children. "Observe our faster-than-light travel capabilities." The Eternal Glory performed a short hyperspace jump, disappearing and reappearing a few thousand kilometers away in a brilliant flash of exotic energy. Jake watched this display while someone handed him a fresh cup of coffee. "Neat trick. How's your fuel efficiency?" "We've been working on some propulsion upgrades ourselves, but the environmental impact assessments are a nightmare." This was not the response Admiral Zeph had prepared for. "Environmental impact. We have transcended such primitive concerns. Behold our mighty fleet." He gestured dramatically as 11 more ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. 12 ships, Jake counted aloud. "That's a solid dozen. We appreciate you bringing the whole gang. Makes the paperwork easier." Engineer Luna Rodriguez had been quietly monitoring the alien transmissions from her station. She looked up from her tablet with the expression of someone who'd just discovered their supposedly high-tech appliance was held together with duct tape. "Captain," Luna said, not bothering to hide her amusement, "their quantum flux capacitors are running at about 15% efficiency, and I think their main power coupling is held together with what can only be described as cosmic zip ties." "Really?" Jake asked, genuinely curious now. "That's actually kind of impressive. Making it work with that kind of jury rigging takes skill." Admiral Zeph's scales were beginning to shift from confident silver to nervous purple. "What are you saying about our technology?" "Oh, nothing bad," Luna assured him cheerfully. "It's just that your main deflector array is oscillating at completely the wrong frequency. Here, let me send you a quick calibration fix. Should boost your efficiency by about 40%. The bridge crew of the Eternal Glory stared at their instruments in shock as their systems suddenly ran smoother than they had in decades. Chief Engineer Klix looked at Admiral Zeph with the expression of someone whose entire worldview had just been politely dismantled. How did they? Klix whispered. Moving on. Admiral Zeph said quickly, his voice climbing half an octave. Witness our devastating energy weapons. The fleet fired a coordinated barrage into empty space, creating an impressive light show that would have reduced most planets to slag. Jake nodded approvingly. Good grouping. Nice color coordination too. Very aesthetic. We went with more of a blue-white theme for our defensive systems, but that orange-red really pops against the cosmic background. Defensive systems? Admiral Zeph asked, his confidence now thoroughly shaken. Oh, just the usual, Jake said with a shrug. Planetary shields, orbital platforms, the standard stuff. Nothing fancy. Luna, are we still running those system diagnostics on the outer perimeter? Yeah, we've got about 600 defense platforms running calibration tests this week. Luna replied absently, still tinkering with the alien ship's systems remotely. Should I tell them to pause the exercises? Admiral Zeph's scales had now shifted to a distinctly unhealthy shade of yellow. 600, give or take, Jake said. I don't keep exact count, that's more of an administrative thing. The silence that followed was the kind of quiet that occurs when someone realizes they've brought a knife to a gunfight, except in this case, it was more like bringing a butter knife to a nuclear weapons convention. Admiral Zeph cleared his throat, a sound that came out more like a nervous hiss. Perhaps we should discuss terms of your integration into our empire. Integration? Jake asked, raising an eyebrow. That's a fancy way of putting it. You know what, why don't you folks come down to Earth? We can hash this out over lunch. I know a great place that does alien dietary restrictions. We demand to see your military response. Admiral Zeph declared, his voice cracking slightly on the word demand. Show us your pathetic fleet so we may properly assess your defensive capabilities. Jake sighed and looked around the command center. Do we really have to do the whole military parade thing? It's such a hassle to get everyone together. Just show them a few ships, suggested Communications Officer Tom Bradley. Maybe the patrol division. They're already out there doing training exercises. Fine, Jake agreed reluctantly. Admiral Zeph, you want to see some of our ships? Fair warning, it's going to be pretty boring. We don't go in for all the flashy lights and dramatic entrances. Your primitive vessels will serve as adequate entertainment. Admiral Zeph replied, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction. Jake activated the comm system. Control, this is Martinez. Could you ask the 3rd Patrol Division to swing by? We've got some visitors who want to see our ships. Copy that, Captain. 3rd Patrol is about 20 minutes out. Should they bring the full division? Nah, just whoever's available. Keep it casual. Admiral Zeph watched his sensors as the first human ships appeared on the edge of the system. His confidence, which had been steadily eroding like a sand castle at high tide, took another significant hit. The human vessels were sleek, angular and about 3 times the size of his flagship. They moved with a precision that suggested computer-controlled coordination, but their energy signatures were unlike anything in the Confederation's databases. Those are your small ships? Admiral Zeph asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Yeah, patrol boats mostly, Jake confirmed. They handle routine security sweeps, minor diplomatic escorts, that sort of thing. Nothing fancy. Chief Engineer Klix was frantically running calculations on his console. Admiral, he whispered urgently. Their smallest vessel is reading energy output levels that exceed our entire fleet combined. That can't be right. Admiral Zeph muttered, but his scales had shifted to a sickly green color that suggested his confidence was writing checks his body language couldn't cash. Oh, and Admiral, Jake added conversationally. These aren't military ships, this is just the local space traffic control division. They make sure the shipping lanes stay clear and help out with search and rescue. The actual military is, well, they're usually pretty busy. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim looked up from her station. Captain, should I contact Fleet Command? Let them know we've got visitors. Not yet, Jake replied. Let's see how this plays out first. No need to bother the Admiral with a routine first contact situation. Admiral Zeph's translator was working overtime, but he was pretty sure he'd just heard the humans refer to this as a routine situation. His invasion fleet, the pride of the Galactic Confederation, was being treated like a minor scheduling inconvenience. Your Admiral? He asked weakly. Fleet Admiral Chen, Jake said with a shrug. She's probably in meetings all day. You know how it is with the brass. Admiral Zeff's scales had now progressed through the entire visible spectrum and were starting to approach colors that probably didn't have names. We demand to see your actual military capability. Your real warships. Jake looked genuinely apologetic. Look, I really don't want to bother the Navy folks. They're running some big training exercise this week, and you know how cranky military types get when you interrupt their schedules. We insist. Admiral Zeff's voice cracked like a teenager asking someone to prom. All right, Jake sighed. Tom, could you get me Commander Thompson? He's probably not too busy. A few minutes later, a gruff voice came through the comm. Martinez, this better be important. I've got 300 ships running formation drills, and half my pilots are complaining about the new fuel mixture. Sorry to bother you, Rex. We've got some visitors who want to see our military ships. Could you spare a few vessels for a quick show and tell? How many do you need? I don't know, maybe a dozen. Whatever's convenient. There was a pause. A dozen? Jake, are you trying to start a war or prevent one? Prevent, definitely prevent. Fine, I'll bring a light escort. Give me 10 minutes. Admiral Zeff had been listening to this exchange with growing horror. Light escort. How many ships constitute a light escort in your military? Oh, Rex is pretty conservative, Jake said casually. He probably won't bring more than 50 or 60 ships. He's always worried about fuel costs. The alien bridge crew was now openly panicking. Navigation Officer Trix was frantically calculating jump coordinates back to Confederation space, while Weapons Officer Blocks was staring at his targeting computer like it had personally insulted his mother. When Commander Thompson's light escort arrived, Admiral Zeff's remaining confidence didn't just die, it was cremated and scattered to the cosmic winds. 67 human warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, each one dwarfing the eternal glory like a battleship next to a rowboat. Their energy signatures were so powerful that the Confederation ship's sensors briefly went offline to prevent permanent damage. Thompson here, came the commander's voice, crisp and professional. Martinez, what exactly are we dealing with here? My tactical officer is telling me these ships couldn't punch through wet paper. Just some new neighbors, Jake replied diplomatically. They wanted to see our fleet. This is our fleet. Admiral Zeff whispered, his voice barely audible. This? Oh no, Jake laughed. This is just Commander Thompson's training squadron. They're practicing escort maneuvers for the Merchant Marine. The actual fleet is, well, they're out in the Outer Rim doing war games with the 7th Fleet. Chief Engineer Clicks had given up on his calculations entirely. His computer kept displaying error messages that roughly translated to numbers too large to process without causing existential crisis. War games? Admiral Zeff asked, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know the answer. Yeah, they're testing some new ship designs, Jake explained. Something about improving efficiency. Admiral Rodriguez thinks we can cut fuel consumption by 12% if we optimize the formation patterns. Commander Thompson's voice crackled through the comm again. Martinez, I'm reading some pretty primitive technology from your visitors. Are they having mechanical problems? My engineers could take a look. That's very kind of you, Rex, but I think they're just adjusting to our way of doing things. Copy that. Should I stick around, or can I get back to training? Lieutenant Morrison is supposed to be running carrier landing drills, and she gets cranky when her schedule gets disrupted. Carrier landing drills. Admiral Zeff's voice had reached a pitch that was probably causing discomfort to nearby space dolphins. Oh, that's nothing exciting, Jake assured him. Just teaching new pilots how to land on the mobile command platforms. Standard stuff. Admiral Zeff closed his eyes and tried to remember what it felt like to be confident. The memory was surprisingly elusive. That's when things went from bad to catastrophically worse for Admiral Zeff. Jake's communicator buzzed and he glanced at it with mild annoyance. Oh great, it's General Cross. She's probably wondering why there's unregistered ships in the system. General? Admiral Zeff croaked. Yeah, Maya Cross. She runs the Expeditionary Defense Corps. Bit of a stickler for protocol. I should probably take this before she decides to investigate personally. Jake answered the call and immediately a crisp, no-nonsense voice filled the bridge. Martinez, I've got unidentified vessels in Sector 7. My long-range sensors are picking up what appears to be a first contact situation. Why wasn't I informed? Sorry, General. It's been pretty low-key. They seem friendly enough. Low-key? General Cross's voice carried the tone of someone who had strong opinions about proper procedure. I'm reading 12 unknown vessels with technology profiles suggesting late-stage chemical propulsion and primitive energy weapons. Are you telling me you're handling first contact with a potentially hostile species without backup? Admiral Zeph perked up slightly. Finally, someone who seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. Primitive energy weapons was harsh, but at least this General Cross person recognized that they had weapons. They're not hostile, Jake assured her. Just confused about our capabilities. I'm bringing a small expeditionary force. Standard first contact protocol. ETA 15 minutes. Maya, you really don't need to. Protocol is protocol, Martinez. Cross out, Jake turned to Admiral Zeph with an apologetic shrug. Sorry about this. General Cross is very by the book. She'll probably want to do the whole formal introduction thing. Admiral Zeph felt a glimmer of hope. Finally, a proper military response. A small expeditionary force was probably a few dozen ships at most. Maybe the humans weren't quite as overwhelming as they seemed. That hope lasted exactly 14 minutes and 37 seconds. General Cross didn't arrive with a small expeditionary force. She arrived with what could only be described as a manifestation of humanity's complete and utter disregard for the concept of overkill. The first wave materialized in perfect formation, 250 heavy cruisers, their hulls gleaming with the kind of finish that suggested they were fresh from the shipyard. Behind them came the carriers, massive angular behemoths that made Commander Thompson's light escort look like pleasure craft. Admiral Zeph watched his tactical display with the expression of someone watching their life insurance premiums calculate themselves in real time. 250 ships. Oh, that's just the advanced scout group. Jake said, consulting his tablet. Maya always sends the fast ships ahead to secure the area. The second wave arrived 30 seconds later. Battle cruisers, each one the size of a small moon and bristling with so many weapon systems that Admiral Zeph's tactical officer simply stopped counting and started crying quietly into his console. This is General Cross aboard the EDS Unstoppable Resolution, came the general's voice, crisp and professional. I have secured the area with a Class C expeditionary deployment. Martinez, please confirm the status of our visitors. Class C, Admiral Zeph whispered. What's a Class A deployment? Jake winced. You really don't want to know. Maya, the visitors are peaceful. They were just curious about our defensive capabilities. Understood. I've brought a standard diplomatic escort, 4 battle groups, 12 carrier squadrons and support vessels. Nothing fancy. Admiral Zeph's translator was working overtime, but he was pretty sure he'd just heard someone describe an armada that could conquer half the galaxy as nothing fancy. Chief Engineer Clicks had given up entirely and was now lying on the floor of the bridge, staring at the ceiling and making small whimpering sounds. Navigation Officer Trix had managed to plot 17 different escape routes, but kept discarding them because the human ships could clearly outrun anything in the Confederation fleet. How many ships do you have? Admiral Zeph asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jake looked genuinely confused by the question. Total? I honestly don't know. Luna, do you have those fleet registry numbers handy? Engineer Luna Rodriguez looked up from her tablet, where she'd been idly optimizing the aliens' life support systems for better efficiency. Active fleet. Last count was around 47,000 vessels, but that was before the new shipyard at Proxima Centauri came online. They've been churning out ships like crazy this quarter. 47,000. Admiral Zeph's scales had now achieved a color that physicists would later classify as impossible under normal space-time conditions. Give or take, Luna said with a shrug. That's not counting the reserve fleet, the training ships, the research vessels or the merchant marine. Oh, and the colonial defense fleets are technically separate commands, so they're not in that number either. General Cross's voice came through the comm again. Martinez, I'm detecting signs of distress from the visiting vessels. Are they experiencing technical difficulties? Admiral Zeph looked around his bridge, where half his crew was having what could generously be called a collective nervous breakdown, and realized that technical difficulties was probably the most diplomatic way to describe their current situation. Admiral Zeph took a deep breath, which in his species involved a complex series of gill flutters that sounded like a broken air conditioner, and tried to salvage what remained of his dignity. The problem was, his dignity had apparently filed for asylum in another galaxy about 20 minutes ago. Captain Martinez, he began, his voice cracking like a 13-year-old trying to order pizza over the phone. Perhaps we should reconsider our diplomatic approach. Oh, Jake replied, sipping what had to be his 5th cup of coffee. What did you have in mind? We would like to, that is, the Galactic Confederation would be honored to propose a mutual non-aggression pact. The words came out in a rush, like someone ripping off a band-aid made of pure embarrassment. Non-aggression pact, Jake mused. That sounds pretty formal. Luna, do we have any of those standard treaty templates? I've got the basic friendship and commerce agreement. Luna replied, still tinkering with the aliens' systems. Though I should mention, I've upgraded their shields, fixed their navigation computer, and improved their waste reclamation efficiency by about 60%. They should probably run a full diagnostic when they get home. Chief Engineer Clicks managed to lift his head from the floor long enough to stare at his improved systems in wonder. His ship was now running better than it had since the day it left the shipyard, and a human had done it as casually as someone fixing a leaky faucet. That's very thoughtful of you, Luna, Jake said approvingly. See, Admiral, we're all about being good neighbors. Speaking of which, you might want to update your star charts. I noticed you're using some pretty outdated navigation data. Outdated? Admiral Zeph asked weakly. Yeah, you've got at least 6 systems marked as uninhabited that actually have pretty thriving colonies now. Could cause some awkward misunderstandings if you accidentally wander into someone's backyard expecting empty space. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim looked up from her station. Captain, should I send them our public navigation database? It's got all the shipping lanes, colony worlds, mining operations, and tourist destinations. Tourist destinations. Navigation Officer Trix squeaked from behind his console, where he'd been hiding since the human fleet arrived. Oh, sure, Sarah said cheerfully. Earth's become quite the vacation spot. Great beaches, interesting history, and the low gravity is really popular with the Centauri delegation. We get about 3 million visitors a year now. 3 million. Admiral Zeph's voice trailed off. The Galactic Confederation's entire population was only about 8 billion, spread across 47 worlds. Earth was apparently treating interstellar tourism as a casual side business. General Cross's voice came through the comm again. Martinez, I'm going to start cycling my ships back to patrol routes. Standard diplomatic protocol calls for maintaining a protective presence, but I don't want to crowd the system. I'll leave the 3rd and 7th battle groups on station just in case. Thanks, Maya. That should be plenty. Admiral Zeph watched as the majority of the human fleet simply vanished back into hyperspace, leaving behind only what General Cross considered a minimal diplomatic escort. The minimal escort still outnumbered his entire invasion force by roughly 10 to 1. Admiral, Jake said kindly, I hope this doesn't come across the wrong way, but you might want to consider upgrading your military strategy. The whole intimidating arrival followed by demands for surrender approach is pretty outdated. Most species these days prefer to start with a friendly hello and see where things go from there. Friendly hello, Admiral Zeph repeated numbly. Exactly, much less stressful for everyone involved. Plus it opens up all sorts of opportunities for trade agreements, cultural exchanges, that sort of thing. We've got some excellent coffee that's quite popular with silicon-based life forms. Communications Officer Tom Bradley had been quietly monitoring Confederation fleet channels and looked up with barely concealed amusement. Captain, I'm picking up some interesting chatter from their other ships. Apparently, they're frantically updating their database to mark human space as, let me get the translation right, absolutely do not disturb under any circumstances, possibly protected by elder gods. Elder gods, Jake laughed. That's flattering, but we're just regular people. Though I suppose from their perspective, our technology might seem a bit advanced. Admiral Zeph made a sound that his translator rendered as something between a sigh and a death rattle. Captain Martinez, would it be possible to establish formal diplomatic relations? Perhaps arrange for some sort of technological assistance? Of course, Jake said warmly. We're always happy to help. Luna's already upgraded your ships, and I'm sure our trade department would love to discuss some commerce agreements. Fair warning though, our bureaucracy can be a bit slow. You might be waiting a few weeks for all the paperwork to go through. Weeks, Admiral Zeph repeated, as if the concept of measured bureaucratic time was foreign to him. Which, considering he'd been expecting to conquer Earth in an afternoon, it probably was. Don't worry, Jake assured him. We'll send you some entertainment packages to help pass the time. I highly recommend our cooking shows. Apparently, they're quite popular with reptilian species. As the Eternal Glory and its escorts prepared to depart, Admiral Zeff took one last look at the human ships surrounding them. The escort vessels alone represented more firepower than his entire civilization could muster, and the humans were treating them like a polite send-off committee. "Captain Martinez," he said finally, "thank you for your hospitality. Any time, Admiral. Safe travels and don't be strangers. Next time you're in the neighborhood, give us a call ahead of time. We'll put together a proper welcome party." As the Confederation fleet limped away at what was probably their maximum speed, Admiral Zeff reflected on the day's events. He'd come to conquer a primitive world and instead discovered that humanity had apparently been using the galaxy as their personal playground for quite some time. On the bright side, his ship had never run better, and he had a dozen new recipes for something called chocolate chip cookies that his cultural officer was convinced could revolutionize Confederation cuisine. It wasn't the conquest he'd planned, but as career changes went, it beat unemployment.